Hey everybody, just wanted to shoot a bit of a walk around video here on my RC Powers T50 V1 version 1. Long name for a small plane, but anyway, looks awfully cool. Anyway, that's what I thought I'd do, and I've actually already flown this plane. I've got probably about a dozen flights on it now. So I think what I'm going to start doing with my walk-around videos is, if my plane survives its maiden flight, is I'll shoot the walk-around video after I've flown it, and then hopefully I can be able to talk about any connections between mods I've made or techniques I've made, and good or bad, and how it affects the flight performance. So anyway, here we go. First thing I need to do is acknowledge Color C or Colo RC. COLORC from the RC Powers forum. He was gracious enough to post some details on mods that he made to this plane to help make it more stable, in both in a post and a short discussion on one of his flight videos. So thanks very much to Color C or COLORC, depending on how that should be pronounced, from the RC Powers forum, because the mods that he suggested, I think, it just worked out awesome for me and helped make this plane quite a bit more stable and nicer to fly. So anyway, I'm just going to talk very quickly about the basic construction. It's actually one of the easier RC Powers planes. I actually found it, to be honest, a little bit easier to build than the F-22 V1. It's primarily, like a lot of park jets, it's a big, it's a big wing plate. This takes probably about one sheet of Depron 27-inch by 39-inch. I made my airfoils out of paperless dollar store foam, so that obviously saved me a lot of Depron. Otherwise, I probably would have used a bit more than a sheet of Depron. So essentially, the wing plate is all one piece, including the ailerons and elevons are all one piece on the. Actually, I should say this. I use the untiled plans, so the single sheet. I didn't use the tiled plans, except for a couple of situations that I'll discuss later. So it was all one piece, so it made that very easy. The fuselage is basically two pieces. It's kind of a partial tube, score and fold tube, that includes this bottom piece down the center here. You can see all the score lines as it wraps around, and then this center, just very thin little center strip, which goes down the middle here, which sort of helps hold this the rest of the fuselage in place. So once you get your wing plate all sorted out, get your carbon fiber reinforcements put in, your control surfaces hinged on, that you plan on using, you build your fuselage, and then you just basically mate the two. The fuselage is sort of, or the wing plate is sort of sandwiched between the top and the bottom part of the fuselage. So once you're done that, that's pretty much it. You have for difficulty, I should say. Then you have the your two nacelles here that give you lots of strength in the longitudinal axis, and also give you something to land on. And then you have these two top pieces here, which are I'll just call them engine top pieces. They would represent where the engines are. They're a little bit longer, but they actually have. I posted the question on the forum, and Scott Lott in Air Force 101 responded that these would probably be necessary for aerodynamic purposes. Originally, I was thinking, maybe I'd leave them off, make it sleeker, but Scott Lott, who designed this plane, mentioned that they're good to help keep the air clean along the top of the wing. So I left those on, and I'm glad I did, because it flies great. So then you've got those pieces, and then you've got your vertical stabs, and that's about it. You've got your door here, obviously, for your electronics bay. So very straightforward build if you're not getting too complicated like I did. Anyway, so back to the mods that Color C or Colo RC talked about. The main one, or one of the first ones, to help get more weight forward on this plane was to move the motor mount forward by about 3/4 of an inch. So all I did was, after I laid the paper out on the plans, was I just measured ahead on the forward part of the prop slot and where the motor mount is. I just measured ahead 3/4 of an inch and then redrew my line so I could cut it out. What I did in the back was I just left it. I didn't move the back line forward. This would actually be sort of like a partial bow tie, I guess. And what I did was I just cut straight across there. So it actually gives me a nice big prop slot. Pardon me. And then I just beveled this this leading edge of the back deck there. So that was one of the first ones. Second one, to help a little bit with lateral stability, was lengthening these. Normally they would end, kind of hard to see there in that shadow, so actually I'll go to this one. So normally they would end right about here, and all I did was I drew a line 1/2 inch above the original top, so it looks a little bit more pointy than it does on the plans. But I think that extra little bit of space probably gives us a little bit of extra lateral stability, because actually at speed, 50% throttle or higher, I was amazed at how exceptionally stable this plane is when it flies. So, and then one of the other mods that I borrowed is normally the KF airfoil on the top here. I decided to go with KF4s. With 4mm, about 4.5 millimeter paperless dollar store foam. Normally the top airfoil would just kind of run straight into here and just up to this piece here. So what I ended up doing is using Color C, Colo RC's mod. I ran the airfoil all the way in. I just continued the trailing edge straight in to the fuselage here, and then I ran it all the way forward along the intake. Now I made that one piece just because I didn't feel like cutting a bunch of pieces out and butting them all together. So what I did there was I just went to the tiled plans, and I found the pages that I needed to print all this off, because on the tiled plans the airfoil is not a separate piece. It's actually sort of, you got a gray dotted line along the trailing edge. So that worked out well. I think it printed off about 4 sheets, and then I just cut this all out in one piece. It just makes for a nicer setup, and actually a little bit easier, because once you cut out one, then you can use it for the template to cut out the other, rather than cutting and trying to fit a bunch of pieces together and ending up with seam lines. Anyway, that technique worked well for me. So what mods did I do myself? Well, number one, I've built this plane probably at beyond its maximum recommended limit for weight and power setup. You can see I have the NTM prop drive motor in here, and I sort of went into this build with the idea that I was eventually going to put the NTM prop drive in it. My initial plan was to maiden it with the Focal Price 2700 motor, see how it flew, and then upgrade. But I ended up, even with a lot of stuff fairly far forward, which I'll discuss, in order to get it to balance even with the Focal Price motor, you can just see the back of my speed controller. That's actually a 60 amp speed controller. I had to put it way up there to get it to balance. So once I got that in there, I thought, what the heck, I might as well just bite the bullet and put the big V8 NTM prop drive motor in there anyway. So that's what I did. So in preparation for that, I put a lot of carbon fiber reinforcement in this plane, as you can see. So this is a standard wing spar. I used 4mm carbon rod, and then I have these run all the way up into about here. These are 3mm carbon tube along the leading edge of the wing. I used a little piece of 3mm carbon tube across the back deck here to help minimize flex in the back deck, and I used 3mm carbon tube in the elevons. So these are pretty big elevons for a small plane, and that's one of the main reasons that I put this in here, to prevent you know, when the elevons are working against each other when you're in the roll, it puts a lot of torsional stress on this back plate. So that's why I like to put that in there. Additionally, with this with the NTM prop drive, puts a lot of stress on this back section just from prop wash. So anyway, that's a technique that I like to use, and I've always got little pieces of carbon fiber tube laying around, you know, that I might as well recycle and use. So that's what I did there. So let me just show you. I'll just hold the wing by the tip there. So there's like 0 flex, like maybe, I don't know, 5 degrees flex when I hold it right out at the wingtip. So the wing is super strong. Maybe a little over engineered, but what the heck, I'd rather that and have a few extra grams of weight than as watch the wing snap off in the air. Okay, so I put these little triangular sort of quasi-NACA vents up front, which is good. You can see, probably, you might barely be able to see, that was a little too close, the front of my speed controller. So I'm getting some air flowing in over top of my speed controller there, and then back through the rest of the electronics bay. So that's good. On the plans, would be that where that triangle is, that would be more of a square, and then with a hinged piece, you can see a hole there and part of my speed controller down through there. So I just went with a triangular cooling vent there. So it actually makes a really cool howling sound when you get it wound out to top speed. So I don't know if that's air because of the rather shallow intakes kind of whistling, or through the fuselage. But either way, I always like it when my planes get going fast enough to make noise on their own, other than prop and motor noise or them self-destructing. But anyway, okay, so just a bit on the layout. I'll talk about some more here. Let me just flip it around. Hopefully you can see this. When you get this all put together, there's actually a bit of a ledge that sticks out here, about a half an inch on either side of the electronics bay. So it makes it about 3/4 of an inch narrower. And I've got big sausage hands here, and I'm also trying to get a 2200 battery down in there. So having a little bit of extra room there really helped. So you can think about trimming that off once you get the plane built. I also cut back on this back deck piece here. This normally, beside the motor mount here, this is about another half inch forward. So I just trimmed that across, just to give myself a little bit of extra room in the electronics bay. And I'm glad that I did, because hopefully you can see here on these holes, this hole right here is the stock CFG, and that's what I started off with. And after testing it, dialing it in a bit, my current CFG is right there, so it's about 5/8 of an inch further back. And luckily for me, it balances there with pretty much zero. I think maybe 1 click of up trim. But I have to fly with my battery sort of all the way back here in the battery bay. I couldn't really move it much further back without interfering with the integrity of the motor mount. But anyway, so you can see it's a bit of a tight fit, bit snug in there in the electronics bay. But the nice thing I like about this compared to, say, the F-22 version 1 is you don't, everything's up top here. You don't have to flip the plane upside down to put your battery in and out in the a bottom hatch, which for me is just nice and convenient. So let me see. So what I did was I normally use strapping tape here to make my electronics door hinges, and sometimes you can't see the forest or the trees. So Stefan Moran, SG Moran from the RC Powers forum, when he posted pictures of his F-22, he had used this tape for, this is fiberglass mesh drywall tape for his hinge there, and I'm like, wow, why didn't I think of that? Because when you use the tape, like a shiny tape, after this thing flexes about half a dozen times, the paint starts to peel, and tape is not as easy to paint. So anyway, so thanks to SG Moran for that little tip. Again, why I never thought of it, I don't know, because I use on my hinges here, on my Elevons, I used fiberglass mesh drywall tape again with foam tack. I might have talked about this technique in other build videos. The nice thing about this is it has a little bit of adhesive on it, so you can get it placed, and then I run a few little thin beads of foam tack around, take a piece of scrap foam, and just really squeegee it all in there, and it just works like a charm. I mean, I haven't had this one with a 4-cell. Top speed on this with a 3-cell is about 86 miles an hour, and touch wood, thus far no Elevon flutter, no wobble, no nothing. These are really super strong hinges. I've also used the same technique on my RC Powers MiG-29 version 3 and my FRC Foamies F-15 Mark II, both of which I broke 100 miles an hour with my MiG. 102 was the top speed on a 4-cell. And I think I was at 96 miles an hour top speed with my FRC Foamies F-15 Mark II. And again, the hinges just held just so solid. It's unbelievable. This technique here I used on my F-15 Mark II, and I'm going to start using it on all my planes. Normally on my ailerons, I make the hinge out of foam tack glue. And, it's held up really well. Like on my test bed F-18 and my lighter weight MiG-29 version 3, I have over 250 flights on both those planes, and my Elevon hinges are made just out of foam tack, and so far so good, no problems with that at all. But if on other planes, if I've ever had any problems with the aileron hinge separating, it's been at the end, probably just because of the way you've got a long surface here, and I think sometimes when it's getting up in the airstream and getting stress put on it, sometimes you get a little bit of torsional flex on it, and any time a hinge is separated, it's been at either end. So all I did here, might be hard to see in that shadow, but anyway, you can see here at this end, I just put a thin piece or a small piece of the mesh drywall tape, and that'll work great, especially on the wingtip here, because I'm forever gonking and banging my wingtips into the car door when I'm taking it in and out of the car. So that will just give that some extra strength. So so for the paint scheme, I went with this is a paint scheme that's inspired by sort of loosely based on a paint scheme that Sukhoi used on one of the first prototypes for this plane. It was a challenging scheme, to get everything, with all the masking tape, to get all the lines looking relatively straight. But I think it looks really cool, and I've been getting a lot of great comments out of my field about how cool this little plane looks. So I'm pretty happy with that. This blue, very similar to sky blue, but you look at these, like this section right here, you've got all three colors. And for me personally, I'm on the wrong side of 50, and I find that having contrast in colors is much easier for me to help keep track of planes. I have several other camouflage planes that are sort of green and tan and brown, so having those contrasts in colors for me works really well. I'd love to be able to paint planes in sort of the standard battle gray camouflage, but I did that on a couple of planes early on when I first started off, and for me it was just a nightmare to try and keep track of them. So anyway, I go with these camouflage patterns that have a bit more contrast. So I sanded and I beveled and sanded all the leading edge here, as I normally do. Here I beveled, I sort of sanded this to a bit of an edge here just to try and keep it more streamlined. I sanded the leading edge and the top of my vertical stabs, and beveled the leading edge and the side of my elevons like I normally always do to help cut down on flutter. I made one little sort of aesthetic change here. Normally this would come sort of straight out and be kind of a squared off nozzle if you want, so I just sort of angled those a little bit to make it look a little bit more scale, and it's only a tiny bit of foam, so it hasn't affected its performance. You get a huge amount of pitch authority in this plane anyway. I'm only flying, I think, with about 70% throws, and it's pretty ridiculous for the amount of response that you get. One thing I have noticed since I've been flying it is this bottom piece is to ensure I was probably a little skimpy on the glue where I glue this bottom piece of the fuselage on, and a couple of times in loops. Again, I'm pushing this plane to and beyond its limit with the weight and the wing loading that I have on it, so that's probably part of my own fault. But the glue hinge kind of popped a little bit here, so I had to put a couple of dabs of extra hot glue back here to keep this from popping off. So I put my servos are right on the stock C of G. I put them fairly far forward. I like to use, this is a 9-gram Metal Gear servo from RC Timer. On any planes where I'm going to use the NTM prop drive, I always like to use Metal Gear servos on my elevons. I've tried nylon gear servos on my elevons with the prop drive, and unfortunately I've ended up with kind of servo blowback. You get the thing deflected, and then the servo just can't hold the torque. Touch wood, I'd never had one strip on me, but I swapped them out pretty quickly. And then this is just a 9-gram nylon gear servo from RC Timer. The difference in weight between these two is about 5 grams, even though they're both labeled as 9 gram. So what I like to do is I use the Metal Gear servos where I need to, and then to save weight, I use the nylon gear servos, because if, on this plane, for example, if I had to use 2 rudder servos, I save myself out of using 4 nylon gear servos, I save about 20 grams, which is a pretty good saving. Similar to how I've done on other planes, to keep this nice and strong, is after I beveled and sanded this down, is I ran a bead of hot glue right down in the seam there, and then right away took scrap foam and squeegeed it. Did a couple passes, got as much of the excess off as I could, and then drove as much of the glue down into the seam. It doesn't add a whole lot of weight, but boy, it adds a lot of strength there, because I tend to use I use foam tack to hinge my score lines, and I had strengthened it with a little bit of foam tack after I cracked the score line. But foam tack is an awesome product. I use it as much as I can, but it is flexible when it dries, which can work against you in some situations, and this is one of them. So anyway, just my technique. You can see here what I did was I ran my servo wires just sort of straight across, and then I cut a little hole on the inside of part of the intake, and then ran them back, and then ran them underneath there. I also ran my 3 motor leads back underneath. That little black thing you see sticking out, that's actually the back part of my receiver. So everything ended up being nice and neat there. And then all I did was I just put a couple of dabs of hot glue on the servo wires to keep them from moving around and getting beat up at all. So anyway, here's my electronics bay. You can see there I've got my receiver tucked in the back, and I just taped my antenna back up here. To get my speed controller so far forward, I had to add in I think they're 3-inch long pre-made leads. I just get them from Hobby King, and you know, in order to run my speed controller all the way forward. And then again, I just put in a couple spots, I just put a little bit of hot glue there to help keep that up and out of the way, and it seems to work awesome. Some things like I said before about the mods. Putting the motor forward, definitely a big help. You can see how much weight I have forward just to try and keep it balanced. Again, I'm working against myself a little bit because I put you know, quite a bit of carbon fiber reinforcement behind the CFG big heavy motor. You don't need to build it the way that I did to have fun with this plane, I'm sure. You know, I just wanted to kind of push it to the limits. If you had a lighter setup, you would not need to go with as much weight towards the back, so maybe things would be a little bit different for you when you built. But anyway, that worked out great. I think again, extending these up about a ½ inch really helped in the lateral stability, and I'm liking this. I use this same technique on my RC Powers F22 version 1, this sort of full size airfoil. I'm starting to think the common thread here is, because I noticed this on my F22 version 1 as well, is it really helped with the stability of the plane. It may, you know, it's arguable. You end up with a thicker leading edge on this part of the plane. I mean, when you look at this plane, it has, you know, quite a bit of angling here along the leading edge, so that might cause a little bit of drag. But as I mentioned before, I'm on the wrong side of 50, and I would rather trade a little bit of stability for you know, blazing top end speed. I mean, 86 miles an hour on a 3-cell is pretty darn good. The one thing about this plane is even at half throttle, it's fast. I think, you know, I cruise around at half throttle. I think I'm about 45 miles an hour. So anyway, so that mod definitely worked out really well. So this plane, I think I've written up it takes a little bit of patience and nerve to get used to how to launch it. It does not like to go slow. I've tried a couple times. I got the speed down to, say, maybe 40% throttle, and it starts to act like a toddler getting ready to throw a tantrum. You know, wing wobbles and the tail sinks, and you know, it just generally is not a happy park jet when it gets going too slow. But you know, give it a little bit of candy, a little bit of throttle, and get the speed back up, and it works great. So when you're going to launch it, obviously you're not going to have a lot of airflow going over the wing or these stabilizers. So it takes a little bit of practice to get the right throttle setting and launch angle. I find now I'm probably at about 45, maybe 50% throttle with this motor, because it's such a big motor. I have to be careful. I can't give it too much throttle, or you know, it's just going to torque roll itself into the ground pretty quick. So I launch it at about, I like to hold my planes, I'm left-handed, so I hold my plane sort of like that. So you can see I'm holding it pretty much right at the CFG, and I'm probably launching it, you know, just giving it a toss at about a 45-degree angle, about 45% throttle, two easy numbers to remember, and that seems to have been working well for me. And then, you know, get on the sticks right away, be ready to counteract any torque roll, give it some speed, and fly it away. It takes you know, it takes a few feet to get enough speed flowing over it, and then once it gets you know, it gets going, it's very, very stable. I'm excited to try this out on a 4-cell. You know, at top speed, this thing is actually quite amazing. I couldn't believe it. I saw almost zero torque roll, no zoom, nothing. It just buried the nose and just went fast. And because it's small, it just looks like it's going fast. So anyway, it's definitely a little speedster, but if you're looking for something that's kind of a slow flyer, probably not the best choice. I know RC Powers has a a version 2 as well, which is actually quite huge. I think it takes about 2.5 sheets of Depron to build. So if you're looking for a T50, which is going to be the 6th generation Russian stealth fighter, this version 1 is like a really nice size. And like I said, there's no way you don't have to go crazy like I did and put a great big motor in it. You can probably get away with lots of lightweight setups and have a lot of fun with this plane. Very, very smooth in the loops. Very agile in the rolls. I've got ailerons and elevons working together. You probably don't have to have ailerons. I just like to have ailerons on my plane. From a feel standpoint, I just find that my rolls and my turns are just a little bit more direct and a little bit smoother. But that's just my personal feeling. You could easily get away with just elevons only on this plane, I think. So like I said, keep the speed up. Handles great. I'm loving it. Like, it looks really cool in the sky. It's a really distinct plan form. That paint job really pops. I'm really happy with how that turned out. The bottom there, that's just black marker on the engine nacelles. So you can see, I'll just show you this, talk a little bit about landing it. I've actually, when I come into land, I probably chop the throttle at about, 6 to 8 feet off the ground. And I have my ESC brake set to off. And so this motor actually windmills. You can hear it sort of, I know that's probably a bad impersonation of what it does, but it actually windmills down slowly. So I think that helps provide it with a little bit of stability. And then what I do is when I just chop the throttle is I just kind of let it sink on its own, just, using little moderate inputs in the roll to keep the wings level. And it actually will glide in. It carries a pretty good amount of speed. And then when I get it probably to, let's say, about a foot off the ground, just very gentle flare. You can see you don't have a lot of clearance with your two nacelles there, so you want to have a little bit of flare on it so that you're not jamming your nacelles into the ground, and you don't want to have too much flare so you don't end up having a tail strike and breaking off those pretty elevons. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth on. I actually find once you get it set up right, it's actually one of the nicest landing planes that I've flown. So anyway, that's just me. So there we have it, folks. The RC Powers Sukhoi T50 Pack Fa version 1. I'm at about 23.6 ounces, I think, with this weight setup. So probably more than maybe what you want or what you need for sure. But I just like how fast and powerful this little beast is. So I'm excited to get a 4-cell in it, like I said before, and really see how fast we can get it going, because it seems to have no problems whatsoever handling the speed and stays very, very stable. So if you have any questions about my build or anything about this plane, please leave me a comment on my YouTube channel or on my blog. I think I'm e3blogspot.ca is my blog, and or if you're an RC Powers member, you can post on the T50 V1 thread or PM me or whatever, and I'll do what I can to answer your questions. But anyway, a lot of fun. It's a V1 plane, so it's been around a while, but a lot of fun and something a little bit different. So again, thanks for watching and take care.